Hey guys, welcome to this episode. It's a little bit of an impromptu review on the Canyon Spectral that I've been on for the last few months. Obviously not riding today, it's a little bit wet. Got a bit of a concussion from topping my head on a tree. Tall people problems, but enough about that. Let's chat about the Canyon Spectral, the 27.5 2020 model that I've been on for the last 3 months. Super stoked to have Canyon come on board and support the podcast and what I'm kind of doing. It was super surprising that these guys came out to me, and even if I didn't end up on a frame sponsor for this year or have anyone come and help me out, this is the bike I was going to kind of get anyway. Some of the main reasons, we'll give it go more in depth later, but some of the main reasons I wanted this bike is it's playful. So 27.5 inch wheels. It's not progressive geometry compared to today's bikes, but it is a super agile, playful bike. The other reason I wanted it is it's a lightweight trail bike, something that I can ride and do a bit of everything on. It's something that I kind of want to get a bit more into after being enduro bikes. Probably for my last 3 or 4 bikes, they've all been big hitting enduro bikes. So to have a lightweight trail bike is sick. So what is the Spectral? Well, it's 150mm rear. This one came as 150mm front as well. 13.5 kilos without the pedals. Depending on what pedals I put on there, ends up around 14.2 kilos. Carbon wheels, carbon bars, carbon cranks, carbon everything. So I'm pretty stoked on the spec of this bike. And to get that for all retailed at 7.5, it is expensive for a bike, but it is not expensive in the scheme of things. To get something like that from Santa Cruz, even from, I think something from Giant is still going to be around 8.5, 9K with the same spec on it. Common Sale might come close, but you won't get that carbon frame. It's a really, really hard bargain to beat. So that's one of the main reasons I was already looking at this bike. Secondly, love the color, love the way it looks. And I could fit some components on there and tweak it a little bit to make it look the way I want. The initial ride impressions of this bike were that it is super light. The XMC 1501 carbon wheels are super light. They are super responsive. So stiff that when you're coming in through a corner or you're coming through rock gardens, they tend to deflect a little bit more than I'm used to, being on alloy rims, and especially coming from some cheap alloy Giant rims from before that flexed more than Schwarzenegger in his prime. The XMCs have been super tough. Carbon wheel is super stiff. It'll be more in that ride impressions, but they were kind of the first things that struck me. Secondly, on the first ride impression, getting the suspension dialed was super easy, being RockShox, but playing with it a little bit more kind of fell more into the realms of where I like it after a little bit, but we'll talk about that later. So I thought I had it set up pretty well, but it wasn't. I kept eking more and more out of this thing. The other thing was, with 150mm up front, it has a 67-ish degree front head angle. I found that to be a little bit steep. Climbing in general was sick. Gave it an agile kind of light climbing feeling or position of the bike. Even though your seat tube angle was pretty slack at 74, you never felt like you were going to loop out or anything like that. And the front wheel didn't wander. You were in a nice balanced position. But when you got to the harder, heavy hitting stuff, especially the 50mm stem, it did put your weight a bit forward and pitched you over the front. So I have shortened the stem to 30mm, brought my weight back a little bit and put them in line with the forks, and brought the forks to 160, getting it around 66.5, 66 degrees, and that's been primo. The spec on the bike when it first came out, as I mentioned, carbon cranks, carbon wheels, but it came with G2 RSC brakes, which are sick. They were really good for the money and for the spec. If you're riding trails, at 6'3" and just over a keg in weight, I found they were getting a little bit overcooked. So I would have preferred to go for some code RSCs. I ended up getting some formulas just because I wanted to try something new. We'll move on to that later. But the G2, can't stop calling them guides, G2 RSCs were good for the intended use of the bike, a little bit underpowered for me, but they are more like a mini code. So if anyone is looking for an aggressive trail bike brake, they're sick. They're just a little bit underpowered for me. And I found I was burning them out and causing the discs to have some issues. Anyway, helped out a young guy, gave them to him for a good price, got some formulas. Other than that, I've left the bike pretty much stock in the way of geometry and feeling. So as I mentioned, 74 degree seat angle, 66-ish head tube angle. You got a 435 mil chainstay on there, and the reach on this extra large is around 480. I reckon 480, 485. That's what it kind of feels like. I'm used to 490s and stuff a little bit more, so I do like that longer bike on some larges now. But in saying that, if I went any longer, you'd lose that agile feel. So what have I tweaked? As I mentioned, I've gone to a Factor Components 30mm stem just to bring my weight back, get over the back of the bike a little bit more, and just help drive that front wheel through stuff instead of pitching over it and keeping the weight down on it for climbing. So I did lose a bit of that climbing ability. Descending got a lot better. The fork bumped that up to 160. Spent a little bit of time tweaking it around. I ended up taking a token out when I went to 160 just to keep that nice linear feel. Front wheel, front tires, all stock. Minion DHR on a XMC 1501 front wheel, which is rad. The shock has remained stock on this one. I would like to go to an Öhlins TTX M2 coil again. This is where a lot of my time has been in setting this bike up, is that rear shock. I've played around with settings a lot for every single bike I've had. I've gone to the full extent of full tokens, no tokens, mid tokens, shirt changes, sag changes. I tend to run anywhere from 28 to 32% sag, depending on the riding I'm doing at the time and whether I'm concussed or not. But I found on this bike that the less tokens, the more linear the shock is acting. It allows the progressivity of the frame to do the work for it. So allowing the shock to do less work and opening it up has kind of helped keep this bike a little bit more planted. Part of that pitching I was getting was the shock would be tracking really well over the small stuff because of that extra token giving it some more small bump compliance. But the ramp up of the shock and the ramp up of the frame would cause this harsh kick just at the end of the mid stroke. So as things were getting rowdier, you started to pitch forward because the bike was kicking. It felt a little bit odd. So I did try an extra token, lowered the pressure just to identify that was the issue I was having, and it just exacerbated it again. So ended up taking the extra token, the original token out, made it more linear in the shock. So I've only got one token in there at the moment, and the progressivity of the frame is giving that nice mid-stroke support thanks to the three-phase technology or kinematics they use on this thing. Marketing for progression. That progression has helped keep that shock working well. Anyway, so I'd love to try a coil on it because that coil is going to be the ultimate linear progression, and it's going to really open up that rear suspension, get a lot more traction. The only thing that might come along with that is you might lose a little bit of that poppiness of the air and that kind of that kind of progressive platform you get from an air spring. So once I got that shock dialed in, I ended up slowing down the rebound on both the front and the rear. A little bit too much pop in it, and it got a little bit rowdy in the rough sections. Because this bike is so light, you do have to kind of adjust the dampening a little bit to get you planted on it. Right thing is you have the option of doing both. So if I wanted to go and pop around and have a little bit more of a slow, playful ride, then I would speed the rebound up a little bit, just have a bit more of a fun, playful bike. If I'm racing and want to keep planted and want traction and a little bit more stability to create more efficiency and get me through an enduro race or whatever with less energy exerted, I'd slow down the rebound to what it is now. So slowed it down. That's going to it keeps it more traction, gives more traction, keeps it planted, and just settles the bike down quite a bit. So at those higher speeds, it just allows it to settle in and bash through stuff. So also found that when I slowed the rebound down a little bit, stopped it from standing up in corners as much, and yeah, came a little bit more of a planted bike. Again, just flip the switches a couple of turns and you got a playful bike in. It's not that big of a deal. The X01 drivetrain has the new GX X01 Lunar Eagle 12-speed thing. It's got a 10-tooth cog as the smallest, 52-tooth cog at the back for the biggest, and running a 32 on the front. The 52 is cool in some circumstances where I've been a bit tired or just wanted to go out for a leisurely pedal, where I don't want to be exerting myself on the top, but I do find myself changing gears more between first and second here in Adelaide. We have relatively flat chill climbs. There's nothing too steep here unless you search it out. But I found that I've been switching and changing from first to second a lot more because having that big 10-tooth jump is pretty brutal. I would almost rather a 50-tooth big ring, but those cassettes are not cheap, and I'm investing a lot of money into this camera equipment and shit at the moment. Shifting wise, it goes amazing. It feels the same as GX, a little bit lighter, nothing crazy. Did my usual shifter mod on the shifter where I like to cut down the upshift paddle, and that just helps me get it in the right position because I have limited movement in my thumb due to injuries. The dropper post has been pretty reliable. It's a 1-up dropper. It's the V2. I don't like it as much as the V1. The V1 was much more serviceable and had less wastage. What do I mean by that? Well, it had an internal piston assembly. It wasn't a gas strut like what it is now. So you could take the pistons out, re-seal them, grease them up, make them sure they're 100%, whereas this new one is operated by your gas strut. It is still air charged, so you can customize how much pressure is in there and how fast it's going to come up and down. But unfortunately, one of them died on me, and instead of just replacing a small part, a seal, or one of the little parts that you could use to be able to replace and service, I had to replace the whole gas strut, which is a waste. Like, just to have that rake and waste a whole gas strut is next level. Super rare though, from what I've heard. I've only heard of this happening in 2 or 3 cases. But I was a little bit annoyed that I couldn't service a $300 post and fix it up with a small part. It was frustrating, to say the least. So thankfully, Mountain Bike Direct and the crew that import 1-up in Australia had me a post super easy. We went through the process real quick, and we managed to work out a way that I could get a post here ASAP without waiting for COVID delays, which is rad. And 1-up support has been excellent. Love the remote. Super stoked on it. What have I changed? So I've obviously changed the guide G2 RSCs to Formula Curas. The 4-pot's been super stoked on those. Did try the 2-pots out, found them a little bit bitey, a little bit too rampy. They were a bit more of that Shimano feel. Even though they had less power than the 4-pots, they're still an amazing amount of power on the 2-pots. Going to the 4-pots is a bit more of a linear progression. They do feel a bit more SRAM-ish, if you want to call it that. But they don't have that ramp up, that kick that SRAM does because of their swing link, or even Shimano because of the servo wave, which I think is a fair root of jack all. But the guides definitely have this progression where you squeeze your tighter, and as you squeeze it and come through the lever feel, your input is exacerbated because of the swing link. Whereas these, because they're a lever on direct onto piston with some changes, obviously because of the geometry of a lever, as you pull in, it does get more power, but it is very linear. So I did find that I was having to squeeze harder for more brake. In saying that though, these brakes are super powerful. They would stop a moto without a doubt. Like, they are next level. So you don't find yourself squeezing that hard. Anyway, pedals, I've gone with the Factor flats at the moment. Been digging those with my Etnies shoes, but sometimes I run the HT pedals. that's about all I've had to change. In the Factor stem, I'm running the EDC Light tool in the head stem just for little tweaks. Another little issue I've had with these hubs is if you don't be careful where you're spraying water or spraying stuff like your degreasers and stuff, it will get into the hub easier because it's a lighter weight hub with less sealing. It also only runs the one-sided ratchet spring, so because it's a 240 EXP hub, it's only got the one ratchet. So before, the two ratchets would close like this and open, two springs on either side. Now the EXP's got a single ratchet on this side, one comes out from the driver with the same weight spring as the two. Sorry, that's a bad explanation. So it's got the same weight as one spring from two sides, whereas this, so it's super light engagement. If it's not clean and it's not 100% greased, it does seize and stop any drive. And I've had that happen multiple times, and I have lost many children because of some parts hitting the head stem. So I am not stoked on that. I'm going to reach out to DT and see if I'm doing something wrong or if something weird's happening here. But I had it happen first week of riding it before I'd even washed it. Had it happen multiple times since then. The Duante grease, free hub grease has helped a bit, but still happening. Overall, this bike has been rad, super playful, does everything I want it to do. So it is a lightweight trail bike. With the little mods I've done to it, I've made it a bit more of a heavy duty trail hitter, but without losing its climbability, its climbing prowess. It's just a great do-it-all trail bike. Been really frothing on it. So yeah, been super stoked. Tire choice on it's been pretty good. The dissector is dead, so it's been dissected. DHR is going fine. I'll be chucking some Pirellis on it maybe, or some Michelins, and testing those up in the future. But yeah, if you want a nice lightweight trail bike that's going to do everything you could possibly think on, whether it's backcountry epics, whether it's cross-country race, whether it's a downhill race or an enduro race, or you're going down to the chicken shop to get some chips for dinner, this bike will do it all. It is legitimately one of the funnest, best bikes I've had. Super keen to try out the 29er next and see how that goes. But more on that later.